On March 8, 2014, Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 left Kuala Lumpur for Beijing with 239 people on board. Soon after takeoff, the aircraft vanished from radar screens.
Our controller contact the surrounding air traffic control centers to ask, have you seen this aircraft in your radar? None of them say yes.
10 years on, what do we now know about the disappearance of MH370?
I am very inclined to believe that there is what we call unlawful human intervention.
And how have the victims' families lived with a decade of loss?
I think in life, when this kind of incident happens, there is no closing of chapter.
就这个活要见人，死要见尸。你不明不白，你到底有多大责任欠你？你到底？
36-year-old lawyer Grace Nathan last spoke to her mother 10 years ago.
I had called her when she told me that she was getting ready to go to the airport, and she told me she didn't have a lot of time to talk to me. And the last thing she said to me before she put down the phone that day was she said, "I love you." And I remember being quite surprised that she said, "I love you," because as a very typical Asian family, we don't express love so openly. But I remember saying, "I love you too" back.
Grace's mum, Ann Daisy, was visiting her father, VPR Nathan, in China. He was a high-ranking civil aviation officer who had been posted to Beijing. She was on the ill-fated Malaysian Airlines MH370, which disappeared a decade ago.
I think it was very difficult to cope in the beginning, not knowing what had happened. And I think along the way, it's just human nature to learn how to continue to live your life, but at the same time, it has been impossible to move on. We're still stuck in the same place. We still don't have the answers to the questions we once asked.
On the night of March 8, 2014, Malaysian flight MH370 was on a routine flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. The pilot in command was 53-year-old father of three, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. He had been with the airline for 33 years and had more than 18,000 flying hours under his belt. His co-pilot was 27-year-old First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid. He had flown for the airline since 2007 and had logged 2,800 flying hours.
They have good track records. Captain Zahari himself, he's a very experienced pilot. First Officer Farik himself, he was doing his last flight under examination before he could actually fly on his own.
The aircraft was a Boeing 777-200ER. It's one of Boeing's most popular planes, known for its safety record. The Malaysian jetliner, designated MH370, had been in service for 12 years and had clocked 53,400 hours.
The plane was in good condition. It's a fairly new aircraft. The aircraft hasn't got any major snags.
At 12:40 a.m. local time, the Malaysian control tower gave MH370 the green light for departure. It taxied to the runway with 239 people on board.
370, 3 to right of takeoff. Nice.
It was expected to land in Beijing at 6:30 a.m. the same day.
Malaysian 370.
I think before and after takeoff, till about an hour after takeoff, there was no apparent issue as well. The plane functioned normally, and the pilots were able to enter into the flight computer in terms of the intended routes all the way to Beijing.
The route will take the aircraft towards Beijing, towards northeast, passing through almost near Kota Baru, Kelantan.
Some communication between planes and ground control is done through the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, or ACARS. It transmits every 30 minutes.
ACARS is the communication that enables a lot of the data linkages, and even though the pilots don't have to speak, a lot of the data communication goes on between the airplane and also very often with the airline operations controls. This is sort of independent of pilot-initiated or air traffic controller-initiated communications.
But at 1:07 a.m., the plane's ACARS was disabled. The plane, however, remained on course.
So it's unusual for this to be completely off. And for an aircraft to have this kind of ACARS communication to be turned off, very likely someone needs to physically go down into the avionics bay to turn it off, or maybe there's some catastrophic failure of some sort or fire that burns through some of the wires, for example. So it's either one or two. It's very difficult for to think through a scenario where this communication abruptly was turned off.
As the plane approached a point on the flight path known as Waypoint Igari, MH370 was leaving Malaysian airspace and entering Vietnamese jurisdiction.
And at this point, subsequently have the formality to follow the protocol, which is to actuate communication with Ho Chi Minh ATC.
Our controller contacted the pilot of MH370 to say that to change your radio frequency and report to Ho Chi Minh City.
370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9, good night.
The acknowledgement came a few seconds later.
Good night, Malaysia 370.
But the plane didn't contact Vietnam. Instead, those were the final words from the cockpit of flight MH370. At 1:21 a.m., the plane's transponder, which identifies the plane to civilian radar, suddenly stopped working.
Usually in a commercial aircraft, they will have a transponder. A transponder will identify what will be the location of the aircraft, the speed, the heading, also the altitude of the aircraft. So you can turn this around and you can off the transponder. So it's as easy as that.
Typically, it's on all the time, from when the plane starts till it comes to a final stop. But in this case, at that point, past Kota Baru, shortly past Kota Baru, that also was off. So that was a little bit odd for this particular flight.
At 1:37 a.m., the next transmission through ACARS was due, but it never came. Malaysian Air Control assumed the plane was in Vietnamese airspace. It was only at 2:30 a.m. before they realized something was amiss.
Our controller contacted the surrounding air traffic control centers to ask, have you seen this aircraft in your radar? None of them say yes.
Fuad was at home resting when he received a call from the duty manager at the KLIA control. He then instructed the duty manager to establish contact with the aircraft.
We tried to contact Captain of MH370, Captain Zahri, on the satellite communication, and as well as to send an ACARS message just to ask, where are you now, where you're missing from the screen. There was no response then. So then I knew there's something wrong. So after that, I told my duty manager to issue an alert. We call it a code red alert.
MH370 did not land at Beijing International Airport, its scheduled arrival time. And at 7:24 a.m., MAS made a public announcement. MH370 was lost. Azharuddin was at home the night when MH370 disappeared from the radar because he was unwell. When he switched on his mobile phone the next morning, text messages came in fast and furious, telling him about the missing aircraft.
So it was shock. It was things go into my head. What happened? Is it crash? Is it accident? Where is the aircraft? Because we are trained to face that kind of problem. But this is massive. This is massive. This is big.
Meanwhile, on the morning of 8th of March 2014, Grace's father, VPR Nathan, was at Beijing airport to pick up his wife and Daisy.
I went to the arrival hall and then I saw that there was no information on MH370 about the landing time. So I called them. I called the air traffic control center in Kuala Lumpur because I used to work there, so I know the number. So I dialed the number, and then the guy who picked up the phone was also one of the search and rescue mission coordinators. So he didn't know my wife was on the plane. He explained to me all the event that took place and what was being done at that point in time. After he finished, then I told him my wife is on that plane. Then thereafter I knew the information, then I cut the call. I sat down there in the airport for a while. I think I broke down. At the time, Grace was in UK, so I called her.
He sounded very, very strange. The conversation was strange, his voice was strange. And then it dawned on me that I had a very strong feeling that something had happened either to my mother or my sister for my dad to feel so affected. I tried calling him back a few times and there was no answer. And then he called me back again and he said, get on the next flight and come back home. And he said that something has happened to the plane your mother was on.
But in those early hours, it was not clear what had happened.
The information kept changing. A lot of information came trickling out in the days to come. And it was just an emotional roller coaster the entire time. And unfortunately, as we sit here 10 years later, all of the same questions remain unanswered.
But in the decades since, do we now know what happened during the last flight of MH370?
雪花像不经3月的杨柳春风，我依然在祈祷那架飞机来到我家做客，我做东。
For the last few years, farmer Li Eryo in the Hebei province of China has poured his emotions onto paper.
把我自己的思念孩子的心情，就是写成了一些诗歌。所以说，在这几年呢，我写了2000多首自己认为是诗歌的东西吧。
A decade ago, his son, Li Yanlin, worked for Chinese telecoms equipment giant ZTE. He was due to return from a business trip in Malaysia. He was on board MH370.
我孩子在我们那个小山村里边是第一个出国工作的，所以说引起了特别大的轰动。但是当我听到我孩子失联这个消息之后，特别感到不可思议。
There were 14 nationalities on board MH370 when it disappeared. Among them were Malaysians, Europeans, Indonesians, Indians, Australians, and Americans. Chinese nationals, though, made up the largest group of passengers.
不管怎么样，我和我老婆，我们相互搀扶着，相互这个鼓励着。 一定要坚持下来，一定要等一个真相出来。
In the years since, a picture would emerge of what happened to MH370. At about 5:30 a.m. on the 8th of March 2014, the Kuala Lumpur Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Centre was activated. Communication had been lost with MH370 for about 4 hours by then. The initial focus was in areas around the South China Sea, between southern Vietnam and Malaysia, the last confirmed location of the plane.
There were also reports by people on some people on the oil platforms and oil rigs. They saw flashes of fire, they heard explosion. So that led us to believe that the aircraft actually went down in South China Sea.
4 days later, a breakthrough. Data from the Malaysian military radar revealed that MH370 had diverted from its original flight path.
MH370 did indeed turn back. It then flew in a westerly direction back over Peninsular Malaysia before turning northwest.
Questions were raised over the delay in releasing this information.
It was detected by several radar, especially the military radar from Malaysia and radar by other countries as well, but it was not disclosed because they did not want to disclose the capability of their military asset.
And I think one of the reasons was that they had to dig into their records and they have to reconcile that with all the known identification of other airplanes. Because the radar sweeps around once every few minutes, so you have many such plots and you kind of have to reconcile with all the other nearby airplanes. So it takes a little bit of time.
With the military data, another possibility emerged. Were the pilots attempting an emergency landing at the nearest airport?
There's a theory that said that the nearest airport to be open in Peninsular Malaysia would be Penang Airport. So there is a speculative statement with regards to the turn back. They were heading back to Penang to land the aircraft there, but this is merely speculation.
But it did not land in Penang. It proceeded northwesterly and proceeded towards Andaman and then made another turn. And that we cannot explain.
The search area was expanded to the Andaman Sea, but yielded nothing. Then, another piece of information would emerge. While the plane was incommunicado, it was still pinging an orbital satellite. By measuring the timing of these pings and calculating the distance between the plane and the satellite, MH370 was placed somewhere on these two huge arcs. The northern arc stretched into Central Asia, the southern arc which swooped towards the Indian Ocean. Analysis on the final flight signals from a British satellite communications company, Inmarsat, and Air Accidents Investigation Branch, AAIB, later concluded that the plane had headed towards the Indian Ocean.
It was almost a week before we made this conclusion. So the search, as you can see, were completely off track initially. And I think we lost valuable time because if people were able to get to that location in time within 12 hours or maybe a day, some debris might have shown up.
Australia, China and Malaysian authorities mounted a 120,000 square kilometre joint search operation in the southern Indian Ocean. But the 3-year effort only found small pieces of debris washed up on islands in the Indian Ocean and on the African coast. Out of the 27 pieces discovered, 3 were positively identified as coming from Flight 370. No bodies were found, nor the plane's black box. Major Dr. Muhammad Haridon has been involved in several search and rescue missions. He explains the difficulty of determining the plane's location.
Even though we have the ping, we have the handshake data, but that is just approximate location of the airplane. So approximation means that we have to utilize probability theory. We have an approximate location, but it's still approximate. It's not a pinpoint location.
It's a vast ocean. We are looking at a needle in a haystack, and when we don't even know where the haystack is.
Many theories have been put forward to explain the disappearance of flight MH370. Among them, pilot error, plane malfunction, explosion or fire on board, hijacking, and acts of terrorism.
So typically, the hijackers had some motivation, and they will make the motivation known, and there might be some negotiation. So it's unlikely that they will turn off the ACARS communication. And if the hijackers' motivation were self-destruction, which is possible, as we saw in September 11th in the year 2001 in the US, then the question is, well, where would they want to crash the plane to? They probably would want to make a scene, crashing into some big city or building. It didn't happen that way.
Usually when we have a security breach, when we have hostage taken, when we have asset taken, usually we have a demand. But when we look upon the record and information, no demand were made.
Another theory would emerge, one echoed by then Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott in 2020. A murder-suicide plot by the pilot himself, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. Aerospace experts like Jean-Luc Marchand agree.
Okay, so my perspective of what happened is clearly a well-prepared hijacking by an experimented pilot, because all the actions that have been made are clearly made by somebody who knew very well the aircraft, but also who knew how to pilot this flying object, if I may say so.
Evidence of pilot action included the unusual flight path taken by the plane, as well as how its communications were taken offline.
The evidence that the ACARS stopped communicating was quite deliberate and is very unusual. But after this, the plane was able to make a series of movements that indicated it kind of functioned fairly properly. So then you're kind of left with the fact that is it kind of a deliberate move or not?
I am very inclined to believe that there is what we call unlawful human intervention. That person who does this must have a few things. Number one is ability. That means he has ability and competency to execute that plan. He must be in the right place. That's opportunity. He must be in the right place to execute it. And to execute this plan, you have to be in the cockpit.
But some who knew the pilot personally disagree.
I, for one, do not believe and I do not agree with that theory. Number one, I know Captain Zahari personally. He's a good friend of mine. Number two, he is an active social worker. He does a lot of social works to help people. Number three, there's absolutely no motive for him to do that.
We don't see, we among friends, we enjoy his company, we laugh, we fly. We don't see any of those kind of character in him.
But another piece of evidence would later emerge, pointing to Captain Zahari. After the disappearance of MH370 in 2014, data from a flight simulator at Captain Zahari's home was discovered to have been deleted. 2 years later, this data would be recovered and made public. It showed that Captain Zahari had practiced the same path believed to have been taken by MH370, heading towards the Indian Ocean.
Typically, pilots want to land the plane safely at an airport. So it's very unusual for someone to have a route like that.
It is true that the police investigated the flight simulator and found that one of the sectors that he flew on the simulator was actually towards the South Indian Ocean. But then again, there were 3,000 flights, simulations on his flight simulator. And so my question is that, of course, it's normal for the pilot to practice ditching of a plane into the sea.
Meanwhile, 10 years on, Lee still holds on to the hope that his son will return one day.
我知道，坚信我孩子就在某一个小岛上还活着， 就是我替着他。如果遇到不能吃饭的时候，那就是野果的这种冲击。如果在沙滩上能活着，我能活着，他就能活着。我们父子是有这样的心灵感应的。
While some await answers, others are demanding compensation. And a recent lawsuit in China means the story of MH370 is far from over. Wen Wancheng and his wife, Li Jiping, believe their son is alive. Wen Chuanwei was on board MH370. What gives the elder Wen hope is what happens when he calls his son's mobile number.
就是也就是说，你如果坠入海里的话，你把我的手机，你就个人拿着手机扑哧掉水里，你再向上打，你再用别的电话打，咱说你都打不通了啊！咱也显示电话暂时无力接听。你就有一个手机，咱说能打通，这说明这个飞机就没坠海啊，是吧？它像这种手机出现，就是什么呢？能打通，没人接，它不是一个。 他最低限度起码有十好几个。
The 72-year-old retired sewage collector suffers from diabetes. Yet he and his wife have taken on the care of their two grandchildren, Wen Qiwei and Wen Chuanwei. Qiwei was 7, while Chuanwei was just a baby when their father left for Malaysia on a business trip 10 years ago.
反正孩子这个样呢，就平时不讲，平时从来不讲，也不给提，都不吱声，吱声干嘛都知道，他爸没回来。
Malaysian Airlines offered the victims' families compensation amounting to $350,000 US, or 2.5 million yuan. One refused to accept it.
也就是说。 就这个活要见人，死要见尸。你不明不白，你到底有多大责任欠你？你到底你要欠免责，你免责，首先来说得让我们得有个知情权。你到底有多大责任呀？是吧？你得说说。
One joins some 40 families in China who have not agreed to the settlement.
所以说嘛，造成的飞机延误，造成飞机失联的时候。 你没有及时的进行处置，是吧？一直到现在接近10年了，找不着。你们这个责任怎么认定的，是吧？你们追究了吗？说你们隐瞒了什么？
Li Eryo too is struggling on his monthly government subsistence allowance of $43 US. Yet, like Wen, he has also refused to sign the settlement agreement.
寻找我孩子的下落，寻找事件的真相。为什么一直要坚持这个呢？就是说，我孩子虽然暂时失联了，或者说下落不明了，但是我要找到事件的真相，为了避免这个悲剧重演。
Compensation for victims in aviation disasters is governed by the Montreal Convention. Under this treaty, victims' families are entitled to a payout regardless of negligence on the airline's part.
The Montreal Convention is very clear in terms of compensation. There is one portion that is strict, meaning that so long as the victims' families can prove loss, there's been an accident, is on board, they're entitled to compensation.
Yet, if the victim's family alleges the airline is at fault, they can sue for more.
The convention allows for it, but it protects the airline in the sense that the airline is entitled to show its innocence by showing that there was no negligence or wrongful act or omission on their part, on the employees and agents' part.
You have to actively prove, positively prove that you were not negligent, which I don't know how they can do without finding the plane first.
But this is the step some Chinese families have taken. They brought a lawsuit to the Chinese court in 2016, just a day before the 2-year deadline expired for families to file their legal claims. Last November, the court in Beijing finally decided to hear the case 8 years after it was filed.
I imagine that there was a lot of delay, probably from both the plaintiffs and the court, because without the aircraft, it will be very difficult to meet a standard of proof, a burden of proof that really shows any of these parties were negligent, and therefore, you know, that they hold liability, that they hold some portion of the liability.
Jiang Hui is a spokesperson for the Chinese families. He lost his mother on MH370. Like the other plaintiffs, he rejected the initial compensation of 2.5 million yuan.
新老马航这个和解的文案啊，它是免除了所有责任人的所有责任，啊，免责我是觉得可以的，但前提是谁有什么样的责任被免去，这个是要确定的，啊。 不能说你用252万就买断所有人的这种错误也好，渎职也好，甚至阴谋也好。
Families in Beijing are seeking between 10 to 80 million yuan each, around 1.4 to 11 million US dollars. Parties to the suit are Malaysia Airlines, the aircraft manufacturer Boeing, its engine provider Rolls-Royce, and German insurer Allianz Insurance. It's 30 times more than the amount that was offered by Malaysia Airlines. Still, Zhang Jihuai, who represents families of missing passengers, feels that the amount is fair.
就是因为飞机的残骸或者说飞机的踪影没有找到，给家属带来了无穷无尽的苦难和痛苦、折磨、等待。那么这个等待的过程，他们唯独2个途径，一个呢就是通过司法途径向有关的责任部门进行追责，但由于呢连这个踪影都找不到，所以呢这个追责啊就比较难，没有这个客观存在的事实或者呢发生的结果，那么就很难能够确定责任人、责任方和应该承担的法律后果和责任。
The loss of MH370 came at an unfortunate time for Malaysia's national carrier. It had racked up 3 years of back-to-back losses prior to the MH370 tragedy. But even while the search for MH370 was ongoing, the airline suffered another blow. On the 17th of July the same year, flight MH370 was shot down over eastern Ukraine, killing all 283 passengers and 15 crew members on board. The Malaysian government nationalized the airline in 2014, returning it to profitability only last year. The Chinese lawsuits could hurt the airline.
Of course, by doing this, the financial stature of MAS and the insurance company, it would degrade, but I think we have to go through the process. We have to go through the legal process and take a look what will be the judgment with regards to that.
It's not unreasonable to ask for 11 million if they can show that they really lost 11 million because they were on a trajectory to earn 11 million, right? At least this is how it works in some jurisdictions, not every jurisdiction. If they had evidence, if they had the plane, they would have a much stronger claim. Maybe not against the airline, but they would, against somebody, they would have a better claim than they do right now.
But even if the Chinese courts rule in the plaintiff's favor, it remains unclear what jurisdiction it has over a Malaysian entity.
The test for whether a judgment from one court can be enforced in another court is subject to many things, including between the countries, whether there's there are bilateral agreements to recognize these judgments.
我认为有困难比直接在国内执行某一个公司的债权，那么要困难，但是没有障碍。我们跟很多国家都有司法协助，包括我们的判决会在马来西亚这个政府和司法部门通过沟通，是完全可以协助执行的。
But for some, like Lee and Wen, the lawsuit is not just about making the airline pay.
我要寻找一个真相，寻找一个答案，避免这个悲剧重演。所以说我拒绝了他们这个马航提供的252万。尽管这10年来，尤其是3年的疫情，我们家确确实实，受到了难以想象的困难。
你想嘛，你马航这个事儿，他很多的问题，他都么呢？他都能说明白了，他没说，是吧？所以就是通过法律，通过法院让他说。
In the suit, the families are calling for something else: the resumption of the search for MH370. Ten years ago, trader Calvin Shim was at home resting. His wife, Christine Tan, then 42, was a lead flight attendant aboard MH370.
I didn't know what to do because I was really blank, you know. In my mind, the things that worry me the most is actually telling my children, how to tell my children that the mother is in the flight that has gone missing. That was really, really very hard for me. I remember vividly, after they came back from school, and I brought them to my room, and then I told them, yeah. My son, he cried. My daughter was just 6 years old at that time, so maybe she couldn't, or she didn't know how to react.
Australia took the lead in scouring the vast southern Indian Ocean for the plane, supported by Malaysia and China. The mission would cost some $150 million in what's been described as the most expensive search in aviation history. The operation covered some 120,000 square kilometers along what's known as the Seventh Arc.
It's an area where it's not a shipping lane, it's not an aircraft airways. The window for search is very small because during winter the wave is too high and you are into an area that is not been surveyed.
If we magnify this area, we can sort of see where the areas in the past, this area has been suggested to be a likely area for the wreckage of MH370. We don't know that much about the seafloor yet, so they kind of have to scan the seafloor before they can do the detections. That actually required quite a bit of resources, a bit of funds.
In January 2017, after more than 2 years of searching, the governments of Australia, Malaysia and China decided to call it off in a joint communique.
The stoppage of the search, January 2017, is not a termination of search. It was suspension of search. And the three governments have decided altogether to say that we can resume the search again, provided there's a credible evidence, the location of the wreckage.
But the news angered many families of victims, including 51-year-old IT worker Jiang Hui.
不论真相是什么样的，只要给我证据，我都可以接受。所以呢，停止搜索、停止调查，这种没有任何行动，是我最不能接受的。
So Jiang Hui sought answers of his own. He traveled to Madagascar beaches where the debris was found. He visited the Australian rescue teams and became the spokesperson for the families of victims.
这10年里边，虽然我没有见过我的母亲，但是可能我做的所有的事情都在围绕寻找母亲这个事情。
Then in January 2018, the Malaysian government awarded a contract to a private company, Ocean Infinity, to embark on a no-find, no-fee search. It would only get paid if the plane were found.
It's a UK-based company headquartered in US, and at that time that was the most advanced technology doing search underwater at the depth of 6,000 meters down.
3 aviation experts from Malaysia were dispatched to join the search. Former police commander, Air Wing Division, Muhammad Rafiq Ramli Arifin, was one of them.
The challenges is actually a waiting game, waiting when they deploy the autonomous underwater vehicle, AUV, and then waiting for the data to be collected. But for Ocean Infinity, they carried 8 AUV, which has never been done before. So with 8 AUV, they could search a bigger area faster. This in yellow is the priority search area, and the most highly probable place where they said that the airplane will be found is in this area. They call it the Broken Ridge. Broken Ridge is an area where there's in the ocean, but there is a lot of like hills, mountain, and valleys where the AUV have to maneuver up and down.
But in the end, the Ocean Infinity effort was called off after 5 months, having yielded nothing.
The Indian Ocean is the 3rd largest ocean in the world, and it's quite difficult. You know, it's like searching a needle in a haystack.
The area of search was determined based on the theory of uncontrolled ditching or ghost dive. In this scenario, the pilot was already dead or unconscious when the plane ran out of fuel. With no one at the controls, the plane would have plummeted. But recently, French aerospace expert Jean-Luc Marchand and pilot Patrick Blely have come up with a new conclusion.
At the beginning, all the inquirers think the aircraft was not piloted, and we do not agree with solutions. All things show us it was piloted until the end.
If the plane was piloted, instead of plummeting, the pilot could have controlled the plane's descent, traveling further than initially thought.
And that's why we say the aircraft should be extending after the 7 arcs, a zone which is in the direction of the potential gliding, right? Looking at the minimum distance of the gliding and the longest distance it could fly.
There have been renewed calls to the Malaysian government to resume the search, with Ocean Infinity wanting another bite of the cherry.
In 2022, Ocean Infinity really explained how much they have improved their capacity to do submarine search, underwater search. And they said that they have increased by 1 order of magnitude. It means basically 7 times the capacity they had in 2018.
Similar appeals have also been made by families of the victims.
我身上的痛苦，包括我们所有370家属身上的痛苦，我觉得只有找到飞机、找到人那一刻，从那一刻开始，才能从谷底再往上走。
So I think in a way that many people are keen to know what happened. It is also for the safety of aviation, also commercial aviation.
Then, on the 3rd of March, At a commemoration of the tragedy, the Malaysian government raised the possibility of reopening the search.
As far as Malaysian government is concerned, we are committed to that search, and the search must go on.
If cost was an issue, I believe that it is one of the most easily overcome obstacles, because I believe Malaysia can step up to the plate and ask for assistance in funding.
新的技术、新的时代到来了，找到飞机的日子指日可待了。马来西亚政府又没有拒绝，应该没有理由去拒绝家属提出的这种悬赏搜索的这种重启。
One day, we may know what really happened to MH370, but for now, conclusive answers elude us 10 years on. Nonetheless, the incident was an important lesson for the aviation industry, with steps taken to prevent a similar tragedy.
There are some improvements that have been carried out to first of all for aviation safety, for search and rescue. One of them is the aircraft system, the aircraft reporting and communication system. Now, it downloads at less than half an hour. MES procedures now download every 10 minutes. So that frequent download will tell the operator if there's something not right.
For the families of the victims, it has been a 10-year wait for answers. A wait that will continue.
All I want right now is closure, to know where the aircraft is and why it happened. And even I was given the closure, even I can have the closure also, there is no closing of chapter, because you have to deal with it for the rest of my life.
I hope that I never give up hope. I never want to give up hope. And I hope that I can keep doing what I'm doing, and I hope that I can keep advocating for the search of MH370 until the plane is found.
假如我的孩子回来了，我真的我什么都不问，什么都不问，给我孩子让他妈妈给他包一种饺子，我们吃一种饺子，完事，这是我最大的心愿。不说过往，不说你的曾经。